inspiration for Toonami, it started off as, at that time, Cartoon Network had an after-school block of cartoons, and it wasn't doing well. It was like after-school event. It was Power Zone or something. It had a terrible name. And so our boss, Sean Akins, was invited by Mike Lazzo, who ran Cartoon Network at the time. He said, hey, come up with a new kids action block for after school. So Sean was given a very small amount of money and some time. And for like 4 months, part of the process was just brainstorming what he would want to see in an action cartoon block for kids. And I was part of those conversations. And it was looking at lists of like what cartoons were available to us, and then trying to come up with like, how would we talk to kids and what would we want it to feel like?
Toonami and anime has long had a place in the heart of Adult Swim, but Adult Swim's still very much a comedy network. And I think if you were to run anime next to some other comedies, that's not going to be the same fan that wants to see all of that.
We didn't want Toonami to be necessarily all anime, but we did want it to represent the things we thought were cool, which included anime, interviews with skaters and astronauts and people we thought were interesting, music we liked that we listened to, so not like the typical screaming guitar rock music that you always see on kids commercials even now, but like hip hop, drum and bass, like the types of music we listen to. So when we started getting anime shows, it was more like we were in charge of our own marketing because no one kind of understood what we were trying to do. So they just let us make our own commercials. So then we rapidly became sort of a marketing team on top of being the team that made Toonami and created the block and helped program it. We also helped be the people that market it. So marketing anime to an American audience, when we started doing it, was more about removing the otherness from it and having it not making a big deal out of that it was a cultural product from another country, just being like, this is some cool shit.
Robotech. No assembly required.
Toonami's first host was Moltar, and that was more a decision of practicality, both on Mike Lazzo's point and Sean's point of, we own the rights to this character. We've got this VO guy he's reading all the time for Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense, other than he was the control room operator in Space Ghost and he could be the control room operator for Toonami. But it was really more of a practical standpoint of the same way they made the decision for Space Ghost. Like, this is an economical way to have this character come to life. And that was sort of the genesis, but wasn't really how we wanted to talk to people. Moltar wasn't really the way we wanted to talk to people. So Moltar into the first Tom, into the sort of later iterations of Tom. I mean, I think everybody, whenever you're working on something, you're constantly refining it and want to mix things up so it doesn't become stale. We had a good budget to be able to make these, we called them total immersion events. And so it was a fun way to sort of evolve the character, get new things going, have fans interact with us as we were going along to vote on new engines or how long we should be in dry dock and those kind of things. So there was a fan interactivity. There were some sponsorship opportunities that always looks good to your bosses when you're trying to pitch what an amazing idea it is to spend a shit ton of money to make some new animation. But it was really sort of defining that character and then giving people a reason to continue to watch, I think, are the primary motivations.
One of the first shows we knew we wanted, when they started giving us real money, we started doing okay. And they said, Cartoon Network came to us and said, what shows do you want? You know? And we said, well, we were at the time already fans of Dragon Ball Z, but it had only run in like cable, scattered markets on cable channels at like 6 a.m. So there weren't a ton of episodes available to the US. So we went to Funimation, who had the license, and said, we want to start making a big deal out of Dragon Ball Z. And they were obviously very excited about that. So they ended up being really good partners in terms of just making sure that we knew when episodes were coming and providing us with everything we needed and doing partnerships and doing any kind of marketing stuff we needed support with, and we supported them. And Dragon Ball ended up being the first real hit anime show right around the same time as Pokemon. And since then, Funimation has just been a good partner of like, you know, they have been very smart about what they've licensed, and a lot of it has become hit shows in the US. And we have aired a lot of their stuff. And even now that Funimation has become Crunchyroll and they're one company, we're even now sort of still airing a bunch of their shows and working with them on stuff like Attack on Titan. But it started really out of mutual necessity, because at the time where we were going to air it on TV, that was a huge opportunity for them, because no one had aired, you know, it had been like, I think the USA Network aired like on the Cartoon Express, they aired like Sailor Moon 5 years before us and stuff like that. But it had been a while since anyone, a major network like Cartoon Network that was in 80 million homes, was going to premiere an anime title.
Toonami got canceled for. I mean, the real answer is Toonami got canceled because eventually TV shows get canceled. That's just the nature of the business. And even though we were a block of time, we still very much thought of it as a show.
I mean, the internet used to love to say, it got canceled because of Naruto, man. You showed too much Naruto and it just caused you to get canceled, which is so far from the Naruto was the only show we had that was doing well at the time. It's the only thing that kept Toonami alive for a while. So what happened was, like any TV network, we went through leadership changes. Our leadership at the time was basically like, I want to go in a different direction with Cartoon Network. And they didn't want to lean as heavily into like the boys action genre, which is what they called us. Obviously, we all know, because we're smart people, that plenty of other people watch anime besides boys, but that was our job at the time. So they started moving us. They moved us from weekdays to Saturdays. And then they started sort of putting stuff on that we got for free. So the quality of some of the shows we showed were great, but some of them were just like deals that someone made with someone, or they literally paid our network to run, which would happen because maybe they had a show and it had a toy line and they wanted people to buy the toys. So they paid us to put the show on the air. So then we went like that for a couple years, and increasingly having less and less support, until by the end, the guy who had taken over at the time basically was like, I don't really care about Toonami, and he wanted to come up with a new thing. And at the time, Sean Akins, our boss, was also kind of bored with running Toonami, even though we Toonami employees were not bored with it. He wanted to sort of move on to other stuff. So he was just kind of like not really working to try to save it. So between the new boss and our current boss, it kind of just died because of apathy. It was literally like, look, it's been on for 11 years. That's long enough. And frankly, most TV blocks don't last more than 3 or 4 years, let alone 11. So like, they did have a point. I mean, TV blocks are like restaurants. They're not usually built to last forever. It's a turnover business.
I think the evolution is both the audience who was a kid when we were on Cartoon Network is now grown and watching on Adult Swim. And it's just trying to figure out, like, how do we serve those people who've been fans for literally at this point 20 years without just constantly being like, remember when we did this other thing? And the whole time just being like a nonstop nostalgia time. Because we're trying to grow new fans. We're trying to get more people watching, but we still want to have people watch who've always watched, because that's our core audience.
Since 2012, we've been back, and we're now in our 11th year of the second version of Toonami. And through 22 years of being on television, we've seen a lot of ups and downs from our industry, from the company we work for. I mean, our company has been bought 4 times in the time that Toonami's been around. So, you know, we did live events. We went to all kinds of cons. We had lots of contests. We did these little things called total immersion events, where our host Tom would get in these adventures, and we would spend tons of money on those and get sponsored. And then as Toonami was on its way to getting canceled the first time, we had less and less money to work with. And so then when we came back, because it was more of an experiment, will this work? Because when we came back, we were on Adult Swim, not Cartoon Network anymore. And we weren't sure if it was going to work for an adult audience. So our boss at the time, again, was Mike Lazo, and he was like, I'll give you a little money and see what you can do. So for a couple years, we were just kind of scraping by reusing old footage, trying to find shows we knew would be fairly cheap. But then, as we started to do well, anime started having a second boom with the streaming era, and kids catching up to it. And then they started giving us a little more money again till we got to the point where we could do original productions, which is where we are now. I would argue we have a little less money than we used to, but we're still making 4 or 5 original series now, which is something, you know, we wouldn't have thought we would be able to do 15 years ago. So I think the highest compliment you could pay Toonami is that it did well enough that not only is it seen as being something that helped lead the way for breaking anime in the US, it ended up doing well enough that we ourselves became creators of anime and producing shows and series and stuff like that.